Hi, welcome to the Performance and Talent Management webinar. Today we'll be going over different things of measuring performance and finding that top talent, as that's a revolving issue throughout the organizations today that constantly comes up. How do you find the right talent? How do you maintain the right talent? Do you have the right talent in your organization? So we're going to be walking through some tips and tricks today on how to do that. So to begin with, my name is Kelsey Bradbury, and I'm a managing functional consultant here with Cicero. I've been with Cicero for a little under a year, but I am bringing 5 years of Workday experience being the sole HRIS support administrator. From prior organizations, I was in client, and I went from everything from recruiting all the way through to payroll and even dabbled a bit into finance. So my experience is I'm able to connect a lot of the dots and talk high level with how things flow through the system, that employee engagement, how to get at the right user experience, and to ensure we're calling out where items might be breaking and making sure we're configuring things to the best we possibly can to make it as efficient and manageable for not only yourself as an HRIS teams, but also for the end users, those employees, those managers. We want to make this a good Workday instance for them, because Workday isn't just a system for managers or for the HR data warehouse. It is a full rounded system for employees and managers. So that's where some of my expertise comes into play. So my biggest experience is probably within payroll, but as I've mentioned, have dabbled in all the different areas. Heather?
Hi, my name is Heather Fiedler. I'm a functional consultant with Cicero. Over 15 years of experience in HRIS, 9+ years working directly with Workday, both on the implementation side, so core HCM, performance, talent, recruit, security, reporting, and also the support side. So once it's implemented, how do you make the magic happen? So years of experience supporting organizations through that process, and then through the evolution. So we're live for a few years. We've gained some really great insights, valuable lessons learned. How do we optimize and do a reboot and make it better? Prior to working in HRIS, I did start my career both on the recruitment and the HR generalist side, and also worked my way into the org development and learning side. So years of experience working as, I call it a practitioner, kind of being part of those conversations in the business, really understanding specific to our conversation today, how do we make the performance and the talent processes really meaningful and valuable to our end users.
So where do we even begin? And to me, the biggest issue is that any project, how do you start that conversation? So any project that I start to work on, my big thing is let's just brainstorm. Let's come together as a collective and make sure to whiteboard it, is what I like to say, to make sure we're documenting everything. Everyone comes to the table with lots of different ideas and we talk through them. But if you're actually writing them down, you're going to retain them, and you can think through pros and cons of each of those suggestions. And so whiteboarding it for end user experience, what are some key values you want to make sure that you get out of this process, and where are we going to go with it? What do we want? Different avenues that you might want to consider and how to approach it. There are so many different areas for talent, especially, that we're going to be discussing throughout this presentation, that we'll get into all that nitty gritty, all the different options that are available for you, and you're trying to figure out what's best for your organization. So the first thing is just brainstorm, come open-minded, be ready to share. A lot of people come to those brainstorming sessions and might not think that they have enough to consider to bring to the table. Everyone brings their own unique perspectives, whether they've been as an employee, they've been as a manager, they've used other tools outside, besides Workday. Everyone has that background that they've done, especially if they've been in their careers or their jobs for a while, and maybe they've been in a couple different jobs. They've used all different tools. So let's bring all of that together and come up with the best decisions and the best process that's going to work for you. So opening it up with that brainstorming session and writing it down is probably the biggest way to start, and just being open. You're not building out the processes right there. You're not talking through every little nuance of details. This is just basically trying to dump everything that you can think of, what you might want to do, get it in writing, and then you can whittle those down as you start to talk through those finer details and asking the right questions, which goes right into that why, who, when, and how. That's going to really start figuring out what it is you're going to want to get into. Heather, I think you have some great conversations around those types of questions.
Yeah, Kelsey. So the teams and the groups that I've worked with that I've seen kind of generate the most excitement and the most value out of this process are those groups, like you mentioned, really thoughtful upfront about who's in the room and why, and having that cross of the individuals who have been part of designing the process the whole way, so they have that history. We have people in the room who are maybe new to the organization. They bring these outside perspectives with them, or they've been with the organization. They're just new to the function, to the department. So they've been the end user and they have kind of that lens to look through. What they all have in common, though, is when they come with that kind of that why not mindset. They come, it's a clean slate, blank canvas, sky's the limit. As opposed to coming in ready to design, ready to solution. And I think what happens organically then when you have that in the room is people just naturally, they generate ideas, they're open-minded, they're listening, and they're just asking questions because they're excited. It's not in a, that's not going to work type of mode, or we've tried that, let's not go down that path again. It really is exciting, and when you have that sky's the limit, why not mentality, I think there's something really valuable that happens in the room. And you're right, getting it down is really helpful, and making sure that you have kind of that skilled facilitator to be able to repeat back, to make sure people feel heard, and that things are getting captured accurately. One thing we have, don't boil the ocean. Maybe the double-edged sword in that exercise is the more people talk, the more they ask questions, there's a lot that gets uncovered. And it could reach the point of maybe becoming overwhelming. So maybe we started here and we thought that this was the problem we were trying to solve, and we ended up over here. And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit in our next slides too, but it's okay. Get it all down. There's eventually going to be a point in the process where now we start breaking it out into components and maybe into phases to say, what do we tackle? How do we approach this? It'll all get addressed if it needs to be. So if you keep coming back to those things that got you in the room in the first place. So what do we need to accomplish and why? And what do we need to measure and why? I think if you keep coming back to that, eventually stuff will shake out, and it'll be okay. You'll get there.
Yeah, definitely very valuable added. And that's where, talking through the tools we mentioned earlier, that there's a lot out there that Workday offers. I mean, we're not going to talk every little detail on this list. This list is huge. And so as we're going through it, and we're going to dig into some of the key factors here and there, and, our learned lessons on the best way to roll all of these out, not all of them, how to roll them out for your organizations, what meets their needs, things like that. As you're looking through this list, you might see items such as development items and then actually development plans. Well, someone might think that it's a development item in the plan, so aren't they one and the same? You have to have both. Not necessarily. There's ways to do it to make sure it's easy for your organization, easy for your end users, and you do what I like to call a phased approach, where we'll talk about that in a bit, but that's where break it down. You don't have to throw everything at everybody all right out of the gate. So that's where there is a lot out here, and let's ease into it.
Yeah, I agree. I like that ease into it mentality. And we have things that available to us in Workday that aren't on this slide. So I know that there's a big focus on the machine learning, the skills cloud, the talent optimization, and that's all at our fingertips too. So I think we'll talk about it, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if you know where you're at in that evolution and that journey and the maturity of your organization, maybe some of these things, maybe you're beyond them, and maybe you weren't ready for them 3 years ago, but you're ready now. And that's I go back to what is my favorite thing about Workday. It's just the options, the endless options, the flexibility, and the creativity that it affords. So you're right. There's a lot here. And hopefully if that conversation up front was done in the right way with the right people in the room, we're going to be able to look at this list and say, okay, but this is what we're trying to accomplish, and this is who we are, and this is how we're going to do it.
Definitely some great points. And that's where, I mentioned the phased approach. Don't roll it all out at once.
Yeah.
I've been in organizations where they thought they had to reach the sky's the limit. Hey, let's do it all. Workday has these great tools. Let's make sure to hit them all. Workday is the system of all HR systems, and they're excited about it, especially if they recently implemented it, or they just maybe went through some demos and saw all the different talent SKUs that go with it, and all the bells and whistles. And yes, that's our buy-in. We had executive buy-in. That's why we bought the contract. But there's best practices in how to roll these out. And if you hit everything on that list that we were just showing you all at once, that user experience, it's going to be shot. You're throwing too much at them all at once to where they're not seeing the value add. They're seeing all this extra time now out of the employee or out of the manager, that now they have to sit down and do all these little pieces. They have to build out their talent card. They have to add in all their skills. They need to look to see what jobs they want, all their different interests. They need to do their goals, their development, all of that. That is a lot. And your user experience and your buy-in at those employees and managers isn't going to happen. So I like the phased approach. And phased approach is getting those building blocks, building that foundation, and getting the data in there right. So that's the approach we're going to kind of be digging in. Of our biggest lessons learned is, let's get the data first. Let's do it out. I've done it to where working through like a 3-year implementation type. Is that scary? You think 3 years of implementation? Oh my goodness. No, not all of this is straight up implementation. Some of them are smaller features that take minimal configuration to do, and you can roll it out yourself. You don't have to go to someone to configure for you. You can, but if you have your skills, you can configure them yourselves also. So doing the phased approach makes it also manageable, not just for that end user experience, but also for the team that's working on the project, your talent team, your HRIS team. If you pull in IT, anything like that, it makes it more manageable for everybody to make sure that this is the best experience and you're getting out of it what you need. So getting that core data, then going into building out the processes. That's the core data, as an example, is the development item. Let's get the items in there. Let's get the data in there. And then the process is the development plan, building out what that plan looks like, and then analyzing it and being able to monitor it and make adjustments. So that's where you're going to have your report. You're going to start getting those analytics for the last couple of years because you've started already capturing the data from the very beginning. So all of that analytical information is in there that you can start to build reports and seeing the value add now. So don't expect to get all that value added right out of the gate if this is your first year, because you don't have the history there. Most of those is year over year type of viewing that the changes, where you're seeing the values, what time decreases are happening, things like that. So phased approach is what we're really going to be talking through. Heather, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And I go back to that on our first slide where we had don't boil the ocean. And this is really, I think, where you can come back and you can find a place for all of it, but it's going to be in different phases. And to your point, that happens over time. But the foundation or that fundamental phase is really what do we need to measure? and why. And so what data do we need in order to do that? You don't need to have your baselines, your metrics, your fancy dashboards configured out of the gate, but you need to know what you're going to try to measure. What does success look like? How do we measure that? And then that translates into, okay, what do we need to start gathering now? And that may be, we know there are just things organizationally that we need. We need a rating for merit. That's not going anywhere. We need a component for bonuses. That's not going anywhere. So we can still get that, build that into the process, but how? And then what else? And with that what else conversation comes that just making sure that it's really intentional. And it goes back to who we are as an organization and what we're trying to accomplish. And we can explain the why. So when we roll this out to employees, get them excited. They'll go in as long as they understand the why. What's in it for me? That second phase then is when you start, like you said, building out what are those touch points? And let's make sure that it's really slick, it's efficient, it's effective, it's intuitive, and people understand the value in making the time to do it. Hopefully we've done it so well that they don't even feel like it's extra time, right? We've met them where they're at and it's just this seamless thing. But that takes time. And we know that. So how do we do that as practically, as effectively as possible? And then for me, the fun stage is that final stage then where you start seeing and measuring the results. And if you've evolved along the way, that those measures may have your baselines where you're going may have changed a little bit because as we've seen the last year, things change pretty drastically and you got to be able to adjust. But at the core, organizationally, you're still going to be measuring, where you started out 3 years ago as far as what's important to you as an organization.
Yeah, and I love that, you keep circling back to that who, why, how, what, that you keep bringing that back because that is the baseline that so many people just get into that rhythm of this is what we have to have. Or, oh, yep, there's a pretty bell and whistle, let's turn it on. But why do you need it? Continuing to question and making sure that you're not doing stuff just because that's how it was done before or things like that. People get stuck in their heads and then they rebuild something that they've already experienced before. But yet that wasn't the best experience, was it? Well, no. Well, then why did we just rebuild it? It keeps circling back to asking those questions to make sure that every decision you're making is a value added decision. It is getting you to those end goals.
Yep.
So with getting into those quick wins with those, with getting that data, that first phase, here's how you can leverage Workday with these is getting this data in there. This is where, you can start to ask your employees. The first bit of wave of data is getting the employees bought into what we can offer you and getting it into Workday and why. Once again, the question, why, where's your value? Why should you want to do this as an employee? Why should you be brought into this process? Well, guess what? If you populate your career profile, if you populate your career profile with where you want to go, what does it look like? What do your skills look like? Guess what? That just helps the recruiters from an internal perspective. That helps your managers. If you're trying to hire, if there's a manager out there that they're looking to find, their next successor, they're going to start looking internally. We don't want them looking externally first. Internally is always the first option. And so let's see who's out there with skills already out there. Well, if they don't have it populated in Workday, how are they going to know that you've done business process improvements in other jobs that are completely unrelated? How are they going to know what some of those skills are that, you may not be a manager right now, but you have experience being a manager of maybe 3 to 4 people or maybe an entire crew. What does that look like? What does your work life or your work ethic balance look like also? Do you have those experiences? Are you even interested in being a manager? Maybe you just want to continue down a career path of being an employee only, being that individual contributor. What does that look like? So this is where the employee owns their destiny. They own what they want to be in their careers in that company, And so that's where this will start to show. And as you gain information and insights, you can start to build out opportunity graphs. And an employee might not realize they have the skills for a job way over in this other department that maybe they didn't even know it because, oh, maybe it's a credit department. Credit, I don't know much about that. And maybe I don't understand it enough to even know what I should be looking for. So I'm not even going to look at jobs in that department because I don't understand it. Well, there's more to just a job than understanding every little nuance of the details. If you've got the experience and maybe the know-how and you can be taught, there's value right there for that person. And you already know the company. So hiring internally, looking to grow, learning opportunities, things like that. That's where you can get that employee bought into inputting their data into Workday, because the sky's the limit then for that employee. And they're being bought into not only doing this, but their career, their career with your company, and seeing what they can do. So then they're going to be willing to spend a few minutes here and there to update that and maybe go out there and look to see what opportunities are out there that they might be qualified for, or maybe not qualified yet, but they know they want to be a CHRO. Well, what do I need to do to get to that point? They can start to see that, and it's exciting to be able to leverage that information. So that's the first part in my mind, is to just start to get that employee buy-in, and it's getting them putting that data into Workday for you.
Yeah, I agree, Kelsey. And we have career profile as the first bullet. And I think, well, there was no rhyme or reason to how we ordered this slide. I know it's one of our favorite things, and really the enhancements that Workday's made with it, just being able to consolidate all of those sections into one spot. So we talk about kind of the ease and the intuitive experience for the end user. It's just awesome being able to point them to one spot in the system and have them go in there. And to your point, be able to feel empowered to say, this is who I am. And you don't have to rely on your manager to be able to speak on behalf of you. You have the ability to go in and show, what you bring to the table from outside the organization, maybe past experiences, past jobs, things that you're passionate about, volunteer experiences, what makes you you, what are you interested in? What gets you going, what energizes you, and then organizationally, what jobs are you interested in? And to your point, if you're ready for opportunity graphs, if your job catalog is solid, you're comfortable with your job profiles, and you're comfortable with your the way employee movements have been captured, that opportunity graph is just such an easy way to put that front and center. It requires no effort on HR's part to kind of put together. It's not a career pathing tool. That's not what it is, but it is a really nice, lightweight way for employees to say, employees, other people who have started where I've started, where have they gone? And it's not a straight line. Oftentimes it's, there's a lot of different things that interest people, that influence where they go. And that opportunity graph is a really nice way to showcase that with limited effort from the organization. Now, to the point I made, if you're not comfortable with maybe your job history, what the data in the system, or your job catalog, maybe that moves into that next phase, but just entertaining it here is a really nice way to say, okay, we want that. So what work do we have to do? If I think about managers too, just being able to, something really easy is for the talent review, being able to have all of that career information from their employees available to them as they're going in and assessing their team's potential, all in one worksheet, not individual inbox items. That can be a really nice lightweight way to gain some momentum and excitement from your employees and from your end users in the way that you've designed the process too. So I think a lot of the things we have here are what I would consider the lightweight, maybe that fluid data entry experience, as opposed to maybe the more defined template driven. But again, I think it can be both, but you just need to always tie back to who are we? How are we framing this? How are we positioning it to the organization? If we're saying this is employee driven, we want you to be empowered, it's lightweight, it's intuitive, and it's dynamic, then make sure what you've enabled in the system reflects that.
I was thinking I jumped on the slide there. Yeah, and so that kind of digs right into the phase 2 approach, which is that those key moments and capturing those when they happen and building out those processes. So that's where you can take just initiating an employee doing individual goals. Now we can do cascading goals. What does that look like from the company's perspective? You can start to capture some of their personal ones early on in that first approach, and then now let's get it all the way down. Maybe there's company goals that we want to hand all the way down the chain through every person to deal with, and how do we analyze it and have those meaningful conversations on a regular basis and tracking those. That's where you build out those processes and start to do the check-ins and that talent review. And, I like check-ins personally because it gets them putting in a little bit of information. We're not saying build this whole Taj Mahal of information out there. We're asking just for a little check-in, maybe ask 1 or 2 pertinent questions and maybe give a rating as to how that employee is doing and progressing. Are they staying on track with their goals? That's where you're having those conversations and you're empowering them, and the manager, you're able to talk through how they can do better. There's always ways you can do better. And so let's keep those going, learning moments. Maybe they're talking through and say, you know what, I really do want to become a manager. Okay, well then here are some tips and tricks maybe that you can start to work on and improve. And we'll keep going and start looking at things outside of just their scope of their current job. How can you get them better as an employee and keep them engaged in not only their job, but also in the company? You don't want to lose those talented individuals. Our one of the big things that we've been a part of with Cicero is making sure to find the right people for on the bus. You can always shift them to different positions, things like that, but getting that great talent on your bus, let's get them there. Let's work as a team and keep them empowered and keep them on that bus. What do we got to do? So that's where these meaningful conversations and capturing them start to come into play.
Yeah, agreed. Everything you said. And I think that this phase really, for me, represents that whether it's a new implementation or whether it's an optimization effort, to say, okay, let's look through the lens of how can we remove waste from the process, and make sure that it's really intentional. And so what are all those key touch points? How do they play together? How do they work together? Maybe it's an input that then now needs to become is something that's visual for a manager to be able to participate in their part of the process. And then how does it need to be packaged for HR when we get to their part in the process, so that they can, based on the maturity of the organization where you're at, maybe we're looking at allowing HR to facilitate the process as opposed to administer it. And if we think about the tools that can help facilitate, the check-in. So that's just a really easy way to be able to start documenting some of those conversations and pop them up to the manager, pop them up to HR so that they can get it all in one spot, as opposed to having to kind of navigate around a system or around paperwork in order to compile that information into a spreadsheet or into a PowerPoint. Let's start building that data in Workday, and then we have mechanisms. We have so many options for being able to lay it out to those roles at the relevant time in the process for them to be able to see it, whether that's the talent card, whether that's dashboards, what we're looking at right here on this slide, just a sample of, how do we give each key role that one-stop shop, that place to come, and then what do we need to be able to provide to them? Is it campaigns and messaging and announcements? Is it resources and quick links? Is it a scorecard just so we can quickly get a pulse and then move on? Or is it something where by a click of a button, we can download the talent cards for the full team, and then we can go off into that meeting? And what have we done? We freed them up to really be able to look at the data, to analyze the data, to find those themes that we want to speak to. So now we're putting that time into preparing for the conversation, as opposed to doing the administrative lift to lay it out. Workday's laying it out for us, which is really neat.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I had forgotten to mention, with doing those check-ins also as an example, so many people see the dreaded annual performance review. It weighs heavily on the heart, I swear, for employees and managers, that they don't look forward to it because I'm trying to rethink through the entire last year and from an employee's perspective, okay, so let's now try to rate myself on all these different items. It's a whole big long list. And that's where it's not a good user experience if they're only doing this once a year, and same thing for the managers. If you have a manager that has, more than 5 people, that really starts to, and it takes them over 30 minutes for one review that adds up, and that takes away tons of their time at the end of the year when they might have their own goals they're trying to wrap up. They might be trying to close out their financial systems or other programs for the end of the year, different things like that, or kick it off. Say they're not doing the year until maybe the first part of the year, and then that's another horrible time. So in my opinion, I feel like sometimes a performance review it's such a negative impact on people because of, one, the time of the year, but then the amount of effort it can take into doing it. Where if you do those check-ins throughout, one of the great things I've seen is where you have the year-end performance review be just a couple simple little questions, not heavy. I mean, they could even be 1 or 2 questions, but it's pulling in, you can have one of those embedded analytics where it pops up what you've rated them on, and maybe feedback or different comments from your previous check-ins that you've recorded in the system, and be like, oh yeah, this person, maybe the start of the year they weren't very strong, but they've been really improving throughout the year. You have it right there. You don't have to try to rack your brain over that information and remember it. So it's right there popping up. Here's your notes on what you've been recording in Workday with each of the check-ins. Here it is, and then that makes the year-end performance review, the amount of data you need to put in has now been cut in half, if not even more than that, because you've been capturing these improvements of this employee all along, so that's where you can really start to grab those key moments and make things easier for that end user and get their buy-in even more. Because guess what? That year-end performance review, man, if I can do it in less than 5 minutes per employee, an hour and I'm done. Less than an hour, if I even had a large staff. So that's where coming back to the who, the why, the how is, how can you make things as efficient as possible, but yet still get your end results of the data to analyze your performance, analyze that talent you have, is coming back to those questions and making it the most meaningful process you can for your entire group of employees and managers. And that's where that data comes into play, is connecting all those pieces that I was just talking about, getting that end result, getting that the feedback in there, and understanding, are you hitting your goals from a company? Is your team, are we capturing the right information to keep people internally, to grow them internally? That's where all of that comes from. Heather, what are your thoughts? Because I love this dashboard, and this is one I think that you had provided. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So before I lose it, so I loved what you kind of recapped on the last slide, where you ended with just the example on the performance management. So not to take too much time, but one of my favorite projects that I worked with that I just loved the whole process, kind of the creative process, and the outcome was we're at a place, again, we talk about the maturity of the organization, where they're at with the process. So 3 years ago, this conversation wouldn't have been possible, but last year it was. And so they said, does anyone ever look at the comments that are in the performance review? Why are, so the question was, why are we requiring it? So, it was, don't require those fields. And you saw, some of that reluctance to let go, like, no, we need that. And, we just kept questioning and saying, but why? Okay, then explain why. How are we using it? Who's using it? Because we certainly don't want to take it away if it's, proving value. But through that conversation, we let go. And it was one of the most successful annual review processes, in that we got very little feedback that people didn't like it, right? And so managers loved it. They were able to, again, focus on the conversation with their employee, as opposed to putting hours into documenting every required field that we had been requiring. And yeah, it was wonderful. And then the way that we were able to reassure those who were maybe a little nervous about it is to say, you know what, if those things aren't happening, if the manager isn't in tune with the employee, this is where we'd expect to see that. And so that gets into connecting the data. Then we would expect those surveys that go out to say, hey, do you feel supported by your manager? Are those conversations helpful? Are you getting the assistance that you need, or the opportunities that you need, or the engagement survey? That's where we would expect to see this. Or that manager who comes into the talent review meeting and really doesn't understand their team, can't answer the questions. And so it was a really neat evolution to see occur. And then how did we support it? By connecting the data. And so we knew what those key metrics, or what those key touch points were going to be that we could measure: the engagement surveys, those quarterly quality checks that we were doing. And maybe, from an employee perspective, just the uptick in their development items, and then learning, what were we offering? Did that increase through the system? Were we providing the right promotions, the right campaigns, the right touch points for employees to really be able to go in and take advantage of the offerings? And it was all done through something. This is actually, you're right, a sample that we had worked on for an organization to say, there are so many cuts and aspects and dimensions to your workforce. Let's put them all in one place. Based on your role in the organization, you're going to see what you can see. But what is it, from a head count, from a staffing, we would have expected that we would have been able to move the needle. If we were doing our talent and performance processes, we would have seen less regrettable turnover. We would have seen increased internal movement. Succession planning, health, maybe we're seeing our top talent move on more quickly, and kind of get those development, those stretch assignments that they're craving, that they need in order to make that next move. And we were able to accomplish that through this type of dashboard. And really what we took advantage of, all that data was there, whether it was, we think about those quick wins, the employee self-service, kind of that fluid, lightweight data entry experience, and not just employee, but manager too. When they were participating in the talent review, again, the example I gave about performance reviews, but then for HR too, to be able to come in here and say, this is the data that I need to facilitate these processes, but I'm not spending all of my time trying to gather it. The relevant information, the information that I need in order to do that effectively, is right here at my fingertips. And they were part of that initial conversation. And that's how we were able to ensure that we got it right, or as close to right as we could.
Yeah, those are a lot of really great points. And another one I thought of, we're talking a lot of, about making sure to keep people engaged and keeping them bought into the company, and sell them on how important this information really is for them. And so there's also a downside though, you will have people that you're going to find out after doing these reviews and doing those check-ins that maybe your organization or maybe their job just isn't the right fit for them. This also will give you, especially HR and managers, building this out and building out the right way and actually using the analytics. You talked about, Heather, the comments. That's a great thing, to where if you make them required, you're making people sell why they should be receiving the rating that they're giving themselves, and trying to prove that all out in writing, which is perfectly fine. But it also, then you're not having that conversation throughout the year. You're not being able to say, do you know what, maybe you're not growing in this area. What can we do better? You don't have to spell out all those comments, but then you're tracking it. And if they're just not making improvements, and maybe they're actually you can tell that things are starting to slip, because maybe they're already have one foot out the door, and you can have those conversations. You have things already documented. You can already start to see some of those individuals, as you talked about, the regrettable versus non-regrettable terminations, and you can start to make the right choices that are documented, so you don't run into any legal issues that might come about, or maybe you can try to correct things, saying, hey, I think this person is great, but I'm already starting to see they're starting to slip. So let's maybe have that conversation. Maybe we can get them caught back up and understanding why things are starting to slip. Maybe they have something going on in their personal lives. Maybe they're having something that they're just not passionate about in their current job. Maybe there's a better opportunity for them that is a better fit. You can have those conversations earlier on, and it just helps so much more. And that kind of brings it all back together, that dedication and the pride, the enabling and empowering and engaging your end users, your employees, your managers, buy-in at the top. Because guess what? When you can give them those dashboards that we had shown, your executives don't have to be micromanagers. They can know what's going on within their teams all the way down, even if it's several hundred or 1,000 plus employees underneath them. They can keep tabs top level, seeing where things might be going up or down by watching the analytics, saying, hey, do you know what? We're clearly having an issue with keeping employees involved in our company. They're leaving. Why? Where can we see? Where's our trends been showing? Is something slipping that we didn't notice? And that's the reason why our terminations, we're seeing a lot of those, and maybe we're seeing a lot of regrettable ones. What can we do? Where can we have captured that information earlier on to have saved those people? Different things like that, and that visibility and transparency. I'm one that, from an employee's perspective, having those meaningful conversations on a regular basis, I am proud. I am dedicated to my job. I feel empowered to contribute, not only as an employee, as an individual, but also as a manager, and maybe even management opportunities. I feel being transparent. I have that say, and I can be honest and open about what my career aspirations are. So I am very passionate about capturing this information, because it just makes those conversations so great and meaningful for everybody's organizations. Heather, what are your thoughts? Do you have any last minute items you want to add?
Yeah, I think what you just articulated, I think that's the desired state for every team as they kind of go through this evaluation, this process. And I think, if we think back through everything we've talked through, it's not one size fits all. There are variables that are going to impact what it looks like for you today, and what it might be able to look like for you, 3 to 5 years. And so again, just having that conversation, knowing your organization, knowing who you are, who you want to be, what you need to measure and why, and then the buy-in at the top. I know we haven't said that before. I think that's just a given, but it needs to be called out as you absolutely need that. And the value then of the visibility and the transparency, and maybe historically some of this information has been considered sensitive, and for certain people's or certain roles in the organization, their eyes only. But everything you just articulated, I think talent conversations are happening across the organization, not just within that employee and that management chain. So it's cross-functional, it's cross-divisional, it's cross-company, and being able to be really comfortable and embrace what we're gathering. It's safe. It's okay for those individuals to see it and to talk about it, because the employee is bought in. They've put it out there. They felt empowered. They put it out there for a reason. And let's talk about it. Let's share it, and let's make sure that it's helping us move the needle in the areas that we set out to move the needle in.
Yep. Once again, bringing it back to those questions, the why, the how, the when, all of that. And so with that, we're going to open it up to Q&As, but I definitely appreciate everyone coming and joining us, and feel free to ask any questions you may have, and we'll be happy to help.
Mm-hmm.